Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of Enterprise Tech Sales podcast series by Coot. I'm Shankar. I'm the founder of Coot, and I'm going to be your host for this episode. We discuss with very different industry leaders from the tech to understand how the tech purchase and process happens. And from that perspective, one of the important people is the people who are buying tech, right? I think the chief data technology officers who buy a lot of tech. So today with us, we have a special guest, Vishal Nagpal, who is currently spearheading the data and AI for Best Buy. Vishal has closely 2 decades of experience, worked with leading companies like American Express, Best Buy, Amazon, and Z. There are multiple other companies, right? He is passionate about data, tech, and AI, right? So today we will delve in detail into what he thinks about AI, data, and how can it change the world or how can it solve a lot of problems. And I'm going to enjoy the conversing with Vishal. I'm sure all of you also will enjoy. So with that, welcome Vishal to our podcast.
Thanks, Shangara, for the warm introduction. It's my pleasure to be here and looking forward to having an interesting conversation with you.
Oh, thanks again, Vishal. I made a very small, brief introduction about you, Vishal, but our audience would love to know about you, from your own words, Vishal.
Sure. Yeah, so like you said, Shangara, I have close to 2 decades of experience. I've seen how the industry has evolved. So I started with consulting, where we were working with some of these simpler data sets where we used to have data and in some cases even in Excel. I've seen that migration from SaaS to some of the cloud happening, some of the SaaS to on-prem to cloud happening, right? I've also seen times when ran like queries in the night in the hope that we'll get that data in the morning. So all of that, right? So hopefully all of those days are behind us now. We are at a point wherein we are talking about LLMs are giving us like even models and inferences in minutes or seconds for that matter, right? So yeah, so back to my journey. I started with consulting, looking at some of how that transition was happening, but then I moved to American Express because I wanted to be on the other side. Did a lot of work on some of the acquisition part of it, how we should be making profitable acquisitions, some of the work around lifetime value of customers, and then kind of also retaining them. So we did data science, build data science teams over there. Then I was heading teams in Z5 on their ODD business. That was a brief stint before I moved to Amazon. A lot of my work in Amazon was around kind of working on the seller risk side of it, how we can kind of identify risks that exist onto the platform, how we can kind of reduce it, mitigate it, say something like a counterfeit products and all of that, right? And then I heard that Best Buy was kind of opening its operations over here. It's an interesting play. It's an interesting play because of the fact that they are if you think about it, they are an omni-channel experience retailers, right? So they've traditionally been into an offline, but now they have a very strong online presence as well. So yeah, so I think I wanted to kind of challenge myself to say that how we can kind of make better experiences in that omni-channel setup for our customers. So I took a leap over here where I'm kind of leading the data and AI solutions on the online part of it. So yeah, so that's been my journey.
Oh, thanks, Vishal. So you mentioned, you're currently, working with Best Buy from the omni-channel, right? Could you tell a little, I think Best Buy is a well-known name for most of the people, right? But for some of the audience, no, it's not as much of a household name like Amazon, right? Could you tell a
Right.
little more about what is Best Buy and more importantly, what work is being carried out by the, Best Buy GCC in India and even what kind
Yeah.
of work your team? So I think I'm
Yeah.
encompassing three
Yeah.
questions, no, in one question,
Yeah.
Vishal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Best Buy has is an electronics retailer based out of US and Canada. So they only have presence of their retail outlets in US and Canada. So over a period of time, they've evolved a lot. So being from a retailer to also kind of doing a lot of services along the way. So they've acquired a few companies like Geek Squad, where we have a lot of specialists who can kind of help customers troubleshoot their issues with the electronics, or have them repair them, provide insurance services, and all, right? So as over the few years, as we have seen how online has been kind of evolving, Best Buy as a company has also evolved, right? How they've evolved is that they want to do something which is best for the customers. They feel that if online is something that they want customers to be easier, we'll do that, right? But at the same time, as because of the distribution that they have, they also provide an omni-channel experience, in the sense like if you go onto online and say, I want to kind of order this headphones, but I want to, rather than for me to wait for like 1 day or 2 days for it, can I pick it up from one of their stores, which is along my return to my home from my office? They can also do that, where they can say, let me pick it up, right? So that is where it becomes like a true omni-channel. If someone wants that experience, see the products, they have very, very specialist salespeople in the stores. They go over there. If there's someone who says that, okay, I only want to online, they can always have their stuff developed online. Or if someone says, hey, I want to order it online, but I want to have it pick up from some one of the retail stores that is closer to my place, so be it as well, right? So that ways it becomes quite interesting, in the sense like how for which customers what works best, how you can kind of give different options to them, which serves their needs. To your point on GCC, we started as a GCC somewhere around May of June of last year, and the entire focus of that is technology, data, and AI. So it's very clear that it is a tech center that needs to be established over here in India to kind of support the growth that Best Buy is kind of planning for. Uh, Historically, they've never had a marketplace, so it's a known news now, nothing that is not known to in the public domain. They are planning to come up with marketplace this year. So with that and some of the other initiatives that are in pipeline, it makes a lot of sense. Technology is a huge enabler for those initiatives, right? So that is where India GCC comes into play, to make sure that they are able to kind of contribute to that growth plan.
Got it, Vishal. Got it. So, within that, what kind of role you and your team plays, Vishal, for is it India specific or is it for the global operations, data operations, Vishal?
So, like I said, because they only have operations in US and Canada. So basically, the teams over here are serving customers and serving initiatives that will be serving customers in US and Canada. For us, when I talk about like from a data and AI perspective, there are multiple initiatives that are being driven from here. Some of those initiatives are around cloud migration. Some of those initiatives are building ML models that will kind of power our customer experiences better. Some of those initiatives are all around the fact how we can kind of make our data on online experiences more enriched to kind of power those ML models as well, right? So there are various things, work streams that are kind of happening at least over here.
Got it, Vishal. So, when you think about data, right, I think I could, especially, you are solving problems using data. For a company of the size of Best Buy, I could think of thousands and thousands of problems, right? So, as a company, right, or as a data leader, how do you go about and identify which are the topmost problems you want to solve with data, and how do you go about it, right? I think I know it's very interesting, right? We can go detail into the particular problem, but how do you at an overall level identify these are the problems which is solvable? So how do you say that? How do you identify which are solvable data, and how do you pick up those from thousands of problems, Vishal?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a valid point, Shankar. So one of the ways in which at least both Best Buy and in my previous organizations like Amazon, I've seen it all starts from the top, in the sense like what are the initiatives that we want to drive. I think it's as simple as that, right? Now with that in mind, can you just hold on for a sec? Sorry.
Yeah.
Great, sorry. Yeah, so like I was saying, like as I've seen in either in my current organization or in my previous organization, it comes back to what are the strategic initiatives that the teams wants to drive, right? When I say teams, it's more around the business perspective. So either it could be at a very high level, we want to kind of increase our revenue, we want to increase our margins, and to do that, these are the initiatives, right? Now, to do these initiatives, these are some of the tech. Enablers, either tech enablers or these tech initiatives, or either these models could be there. For instance, if I talk about from an Amazon perspective, it was like how we can kind of make our operations, how we can kind of increase our ROI. So a lot of these initiatives are how we can kind of automate some of the operational work that we have. Over here, when we're talking about some of from a initiative perspective, there are certain initiatives which are revenue perspective. So then we say how we can kind of make our models better, so that they can kind of have those participation of customers better, and how we can kind of higher conversions. So now once you have those initiatives, once you have those larger objectives, you have those initiatives, and you say, okay, for us to kind of drive those initiatives, these are the data problems that we want to solve, and that's how the prioritization happens. To be honest, right? Because so that's pretty clear that none of these initiatives can't be out of whims, can't be out of the fact that they are not supporting any of the broader goals that the company wants to drive. So that is very clear.
Understood, Vishal. But whether the decision making, right, double clicking on that, is
Yeah,
whether it is predominantly, you mentioned that it is done at the top level, right? But as a GCC, when you are I believe the predominant of the data AI team will be based in India, right? Which
yeah.
is the case with most of the GCC. So you are closer to the problem, so you will be closer to the solution as well. So
Yeah.
how many times the GCC team in India saying that, hey, these are the problems we believe that we can solve. That kind of recommendation happens, Vishal, or it's predominantly decided at the top and given to us to execute.
No, 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 no. So I think in all cases, either in my current organization or in my previous organizations, teams which are like closer to data always have that say. So that has never been, it's never changed. Because what happens from the top is the initiatives or not the initiatives, what are the objectives that you want to drive, right? Now, the teams which are closer to the data will translate that objectives into these are the initiatives or the key result metrics that we want to drive. So, for instance, if it could be like, okay, we want to improve our accuracy of that model from X to Y to increase the revenue participation and so on and so forth, that's how we'll do. And then we'll go back, okay, for that to do, these are the models that we want, or this is the latency that we want to improve, and so on and so forth, right? So that is something that happens at a team level within GCCs. So yeah.
Sure. So when I think about my experience with the all the e-commerce platforms and other things, right? Sometimes I get some counterfeit products, right? So
Yeah.
when I think so how do you solve as a e-commerce platform saying that how do you do from the data perspective, right? That is more interesting for me to learn how you solve that problem from a data perspective, Vishal.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can tell you at a high level. So I think uh, different com so these challenges would be different for depending upon the business model. Because for the companies who are not in a marketplace, they will have a better control because they are themselves as a retailer. So a lot of that will be kind of taken care by their tie-ups and relationships with the OEMs or the bigger manufacturers, and having those controls at a warehouse level, right? So that is something that happens. And that was true even in the marketplace model that I've worked in the past in the Amazon. So what will happen is like there will be certain things that will done at an upstream level, which will be at a warehouse level. There will be a lot of checks and balances that will happen. So there are technologies which is known to everyone. There will be vision technologies which kind of are deployed to kind of make sure that are there ways in which we can kind of better to identify some of those counterfeits or not? And obviously, we get better at it and what signals that we want to kind of do. So that's one part of it. Now, there are so that's one. The other part of it is happen. Let's assume that we are not able to kind of identify that at the upstream level. The product got listed, the product has been selling, and now We don't know whether if it is a counterfeiter or not. The other ways to kind of do that is what are the customer signals that you're getting, right? So whether it is the feedbacks, whether it's the returns, whether it is so there are various channels in which you kind of get that, right? So it could be feedbacks, it could be returns, it could be your CX, like you're calling the call centers, they are kind of giving you that information and so on and so forth. So there are multiple channels in which this information needs to be aggregated and then kind of make sense of it. And there are models out there, some of the transform models and things like that to be on the specific side, which can kind of help uh, get this data, understand this data, and make sense of it. That whether does it mean that there is signals of a counterfeiter or not, and then that is where you start kind of having better ways of kind of identifying it. And the only challenge being is like once you've productionized it, how do you kind of manage the false positives part of it so that you are not kind of blocking the ones which are actually not counterfeited and so on and so forth. So those kind of interesting challenges come into play, but that's how it primarily happens.
Sure, Ishan, sure. Like I think probably we picked up one as a counterfeit as a problem which you're solving. Which are the other problems you have solved, right? Apart from analyzing customer behavior and other things, which are all I would say run of the mill, stuff, right? Which are the other interesting problems you have solved, Vishal? When I say when you, I'm not talking about either the current organization Best Buy or even the past organization, but I think as a leader you would have interacted with so many other
Yeah,
people, some
yeah.
interesting problems. So could you throw some more, Vishal?
Yeah, so even on the risk side or the abuse side, there are multiple problems, right? Especially on the marketplace side. So counterfeit is just one part of the problem, but then there are different other abuse vectors. There could be wherein the product could be damaged, the product could be used, sold as new, right? In marketplaces where you also have something like a food items, right? Do you have there could be challenges on the fact that it's actually an expired product, right? So, or it is a close to expiry. How do you kind of identify that? Because the idea is uh, the and it depends upon like 1P versus 3P and like what are the costs for the logistics and all of that. All of these ladder up. The end goal is that how you can kind of have lower returns, how you obviously lower returns, but also how we can have better customer experience. Because at the moment customers starting having bad experience from the products that you are kind of posting, they'll start having lower trust on that particular company or a platform in general, because the assumption is if someone is coming on a platform, they'll believe that all of those checks and balances have already been done by that company, and that's why it's done. So how to get better at it is something that is very, very important, right? So yeah, so I think those are on the abuse part of it. Then there are like standard recommendations and all of that. That continues to be an evolving space. The and One of the ways in which the all of these marketplaces or online companies are thinking about is on how to kind of have those recommendations at what point of time, right? So, for instance, uh, where customer is in part of their journey. So, are they in the discovery phase? Are they in a stage where they've already made up the mind and say, hey, by the way, I've purchased. I feel that I need to be purchasing this product. But then, is there anything else that could also help me make this product a little bit better, right? So, which could be more about the complementary part of it. So, where in the customer journey do you want to show? Do you want to show it during your homepage? Do you want to show it on your search side of it? Do you want to show onto your add to cart side of it? Do you want to show those recommendations after you've already made a purchase and all of that, right? So, and different and during the different stages of that customer journey, there would be different set of recommendations or different set of things that should happen, right? So that's another interesting piece that continues to be a problem that all of these retailers are continuing to get better at, and then make sure that how that is done in a better way. The third thing that comes into my mind is obviously as we're thinking about any retailer in general, both over here globally or even in India, if you can see, there's a huge, huge play of how advertisements or promotions is becoming like a very, very important aspect, right? Uh, these are high margin things, and because the margin on that is pretty high. And then if you're able to kind of put it in a place which is more relevant to customers, it becomes very, very good, right? So, but the question is now, from a data and AI perspective, which ones do you show? Where do you show it? Even on the advertiser side of it, which advertiser is better versus not certain better, and optimizing a lot of there on the conversion side of it, and so on and so forth, right? So that is again becoming a very, very important play in general for online retailers to say how we can kind of capitalize more on the advertising part of it.
Fantastic, Vishal. Nicely summed it up. From an omnichannel perspective, right? Is there any interesting use case? I'm sure there will be hundreds of interesting products you would have solved. Anything comes in top of your mind, Vishal?
From a from an omni-channel perspective, I think it goes back to something that I was saying on the recommendations, right? Now, what happens is like one could be like what products you're recommending and where you're recommending, right? So understanding uh, this is a product that you can have in 2 hours because it is closer to your place, it is closer to your home, and then kind of recommending that in that versus something that is would take like 10 days to kind of come to your place and ship it and so on and so forth, right? So that is something that has become super important. The other thing that becomes super important for a company like Best Buy becomes is because from a services perspective, it's not just a product that we are into it. We are also into a lot of services like repairs, insurance. Some of that also happens within the store. Some of it also happens through home visits. So how we can kind of have a lot of those understanding like where the customer, not just the customer journey is, but also from the fact that where the product journey is, right? So it is at the end of the cycle, whether it's middle of the cycle, should it be refreshed, should it not be refreshed? How we can kind of troubleshoot, how we can kind of give them the right guidance where they may not even have to come to a store and they can kind of figure it out by themselves, right? So all of those kind of things. So those are some of the ways in which it becomes more complicated and kind of make sure that we are able to kind of give the right service at the right time to customers.
Sure, Vishal. Sure. I think we discussed again about the counterfeit and more sensitive, but I think sometimes I get things which are not exactly of my specification, which I mentioned there in the either the advertisement and the website, or even sometime as a customer, I feel like okay, this is what right. So how do you handle that specification, or even it varies from state to state, right? The information variations, right? All these things standard. So, do you try to solve these kind of problems also, Vishal?
So in some ways, yes. It happens more in setup. So in my previous setup, it happened more, it was more relevant when there were country level regulations, there were continent level regulations, which was very different, right? There were aspects such as, for instance, like what what kind of toy products can you show to customers, whether they are meeting those regulations or not. There were very, very strict regulations around like what kind of batteries they have and what kind of for specific toys, and depending upon that, those regulations come into play. So yes, there are. It does become quite complicated in that sense, but within state, there those complications are a little bit less versus within countries, I would say. So, but yes, those are getting handled. Now, the way it typically gets handled is a combination, right? So it does get obviously gets handled at a data and AI level, wherein you have all of those policies and there are algorithms who will kind of match for it. But because of the risk that it exists from a regulatory standpoint, there is also a huge need for operations to kind of make sure that there is some sort of a vetting, and especially on the ones where the models are not confident or there are potential false positives. those are being vetted to avoid any regulatory implications. So that is where retailers do invest on a sizable amount of operations teams who will be kind of reviewing them themselves. They will be kind of passing or failing some of the products and then kind of taking from there. So yeah.
Sure, Ishan, sure. Slightly a different perspective, right? You try to see everything from the data perspective, right? But sometimes there are certain solutions for the problem could be beyond data, right? I think beyond tech it could be. So whether you and your team will, when it comes to solution, right? You identify problem through data, but the solution could be done in a non-tech way, right? So do you also encompass, do you also give that kind of recommendation, or you try to see everything as much as tech as possible, Vishal?
No, you're right. It's not necessarily right. For instance, there are solutions where we felt that human in the loop is super important. Like the example we just talked about, there are cases where we're saying that okay, there is a need for an operations or there is a need for a human in the loop to kind of make sure that there is a strong review that is happening because of the implications that we have, and that is where companies do invest into thousands and thousands of people from an operations standpoint to kind of make sure that it happens. So it always goes back to the fact that okay, what is the objective that we want to drive now? For that particular objective, what are the key components that will come into play? So in a lot of these situations, what will happen is like it will not just be like a data and AI team who will be kind of playing a role. It will also be like there is a business partner that will be coming into play, who will be responsible for what is the end goal. So if the end goal is like I want to kind of reduce my counterfeit from X to Y, or I want to reduce my regulatory exposure from X to Y, what is needed to kind of get there? To get there, there can be multiple people who might be there at the table. There will be a technology leader, there might be data and AI leader, there would be an operations leader, and so on and so forth, right? And that is where it comes into play that all of these pieces have to kind of come together to kind of make sure that that business outcome is there, or that business leader is able to kind of reach their outcome. So yes, it's never like okay, it's already been discussed that this is the data. There are the problems which are much more easier and will be very clear from a perspective. You talk about it from a revenue participation perspective, from a customer conversion perspective. A lot of it, these things end up being like data and AI problems, but a lot of the problems are also which could be solved beyond not just through data and AI, but beyond this as well.
Sure, Vishal, sure. So when it comes to again the data science, right? I think for you to work on a problem, you need to have data, right? I think, and that too in a consumable, usable way. So how do you ensure whether you have enough data for you to determine, hey, I'm analyzing it properly, right? Because sometimes you don't have proper data or you have partial data, and we might conclude, a wrong judgment. So again, how do you go about it, Vishal? Considering there are so much of information might be coming from different sources, which are like usable, unusable kind of data.
So yeah, so the way we do it is like so you're right, Chandra. This continues to be a problem for sure. And the way what we are trying to do is like we are doing a little bit of a backwards way when you said, okay, these are the models that we want to kind of build. These are the end use cases, right? Now, what is the data that is needed to kind of get us there? Now, for us to kind of get us there, we always kind of start with a baseline, right? So now that baseline could be like, okay, why my model performance is coming out to be like 75% or 80%, and so on and so forth. Now, for us to kind of take it to a 90% or a higher, let's assume hypothetically what is needed to kind of get there right now. For us to kind of get there, is that a need wherein is that an algorithmic problem? Is that a problem where I need more of historical data, or is it I need more information of the same data, right? So with that keeping in mind, right? So you're correct that there are times when we've come to a point wherein we feel that it's not just about the algorithm, it's not just about the fact that how much historical data we have, but also about the fact that how much variety of data that we have. So that is where there are times when we do kind of reach out to some of the third party providers. Hey, can you help us get us more data about either from a product perspective? the SKUs and all of that? Can we have more information on that? For instance, it could be the information around product manuals, it could be information around product reviews, and so on and so forth. Or it could be more information about the customers, right? So, and that could be whether those customers, not just about from what they're doing with us, but what they're doing with outside of the retail environment as well, right? So yes, to your point, yes, that is something we go backwards and then identify what are the gaps and try to kind of fill it either from within or from outside. One of the things that has definitely happened is with the generative AI and the progress that we've made over there. If there are times wherein the data completion is a problem, then yes, a lot of that is kind of getting tackled within the teams itself to say, hey, by the way, I have 90% completion of this data, I have 85% completion of this data. Can we use our existing models to kind of go to at a much higher level, right? So that sort of advantage we do have now with generative AI coming into play. But then there are times when we do go to external providers as well.
Oh, interesting. I have probably a couple of follow-up questions, right? One is,
Yes.
are you using, so using AI, you're creating synthetic data to fill the gap? Like, you have 85% now, the remaining 50%, the AI create a synthetic data and give it, or how does it work, Vishal?
Yes, yes, yes. So for instance, right, it is if you think about it from a perspective, right, and this is something that I know that multiple retailers are doing, and the fact that uh, from a product specifications perspective, there is a lot of information that exists. There are multiple features that will exist, right? For instance, there would be aspect on warranties, there could be aspect on the specifications, there could be aspect on some of these technical aspects right now. What is interesting is like there are ways in which you can kind of have supplementary information for the same product, right? So for instance, if you're talking about headphones, or if you're talking about some of the categories like shoes and all of that, right? So there will be some information that you'll have from a similar products, and you can always use to kind of generate content to kind of get that. One of the ways in which we are trying to do it better is also obviously product manuals, and kind of going back to upstream and say, hey, can we have like better product manuals and use that? But there are ways in which we are also saying that, okay, can we use synthetic data to kind of have that information complete? So yes, that is definitely happening.
Got it, Vishal. The other follow-up question which I like to ask is, most of the time, right? Especially if it is certain things related to the customer behavior, right? It's important for the data science people to understand why people are behaving like that, right? Because you will get certain signals, right? But you don't know the fundamental behind the customer behavior. But you are not close to the customer, right? I think so. How do you ensure you and your team are very closely aligned to the customer, how they behave, so that you make a better sense of the data? Again, rather than wrongly interpreting this, right? So could you
Yeah.
give some examples like how do you train your team in the customer empathy, or rather than the word I'm saying practically, how do you do it?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Shankar. I think that is something that even the tech teams, as a tech team, as a technology team, that is super important because, and the ways in which this is being done is like we have product and experience teams which are very closer to the data. They'll understand that, okay, if customers are using some, let's say example like recommendations page, what are their requirements? Why are they using those recommendation page, and so on and so forth. So there is one part of it wherein a lot of user experience research or experience research happens, where which take information of customers' behavior. They do a lot of primary and secondary distillation of data and kind of share. So we ask our teams to kind of make sure that they understand it. They go through some of that content on an ongoing basis, to make sure that they are able to kind of link some of that information with what they're actually seeing from a data perspective, right? So that's one part of it. The other part of it I've seen retailers doing a lot is customer listening, and this is something that I've seen in multiple companies, wherein a lot of listening happens. So in the listening, what will happen is they will listen. Either they'll go through the feedbacks that is coming from the the customer interactions, or they will actually be listening on to the actual sessions as well, right? So this is something that is a very common practice. I remember in Amazon, where especially during the what do you say, holiday season, right? When you used to have those in September, October holiday season, so there will be listening sessions where we will urge our teams to kind of make sure that they are listening to the customers. They're going through those sessions, live sessions, and track as well, like whosoever has gone through it, whosoever has not gone through it, to kind of make sure that they're doing it or not. So yes, this is something that is taken very seriously from the fact, because if that is not happening, then the teams, the technology teams will not be able to kind of, or at least the data or AI teams will not be able to kind of make sense of like what they're seeing it and relate it, right? Even from a hypothesis generation perspective, it is super helpful that okay, for to build an initial hypothesis that why would customers behave, that sort of an information is just super helpful.
Fantastic, Vishal. Fantastic. I think really glad to know. I think even the large organization spending a lot of time, effort in going closer to the customer, right? So again, using AI now, there is so much of unstructured data might be available of the customer conversation, either the phone calls and other things. Is there any initiative happening for you to convert that into a usable data by yourself? And sub question to that is like, who is responsible for you to give a structured data, right? I think you need a lot of data, but that might be available in non-structured format or in various other things. So how do you navigate that phase? If you want, probably you can split and answer separately, Vishal.
Yeah. So yes, to your first part, we are getting a lot of data from various sources. Absolutely, right. So there are information that we get, like I was telling you, from the telephonic conversations. There are information that we're getting from feedbacks and reviews. There are information that we're getting from the emails that they might be sending. There are specific surveys that are also run out wherein, like for instance, if you made a purchase, either it will pop out and say, "Hey, by the way, how was that experience?" Or it will also be a solicited one wherein we are sending out an email and say, "Hey, can you tell us about an experience?" Either from a shopping perspective, delivery perspective, or overall as a company perspective or a retailer perspective, right? So now, having said that, right now a lot of it's a combination where I've seen companies either doing it in-house, a part of it in-house, or part of it also outsourced as well. So I will not say that all of it is being done in-house in organizations. The reason to that is because to your point, it at a point after a point in time, it becomes too much of the information, and at times companies might kind of lose focus as well, right? But what important is like from a use case perspective, like I was giving an example of a counterfeit. For that perspective, it does become important, and that aggregating all of that information and putting into models is something that is happening for sure, right? How you can kind of aggregate all of these information and help the models, right? Whether it's a counterfeit, whether if it is an issue of an expired product, and so on and so forth. So to a very large part, I think the one of the things that we've seen in the last 12 months or so is the distillation of this information has become much better, for sure. Because of these generative AI models, we are able to kind of get some of the signals of those sentiments. We are able to kind of get those themes. We are able to kind of get a larger set of what that information is about. But to be honest, I think we are, as we're going through this journey, we are trying to be better on like how that can again be used further, right? Now we know that this is what the theme is, this is what the distillation is talking about, but then is how the impact is it happening to various aspect of it, whether it's impacting my returns, whether it's impacting my conversions, whether it's impacting my even traffic, right? Some of those things is I don't think a lot of companies have done a good job of it, right? So, from a even from a causation perspective, that because of this drop, this feedback is kind of linking to that. So that is something is definitely an opportunity, which I think companies have to do a better job at it.
Sure, Vishal. Um, So you might be handling, hundreds of projects. I'm sure you're handling a huge team, right? So how do you manage, or how do you have a overview of all the projects going on, and know whether things are going the right direction, or where are getting stuck, right? I think you use any specific tools, Vishal? How do you handle multiple projects and the procedure, whether it's going at the right time, whether it's supposed to complete at that timeline?
Yeah. So one of the ways in is, and that is where a lot of product management come into play. So the way it happens is like at the start of the year or start of the quarter, we'll have, okay, these are the key initiatives or these are the key objectives that the teams have to drive. Now, for that to happen, these are the projects or initiatives that will be driven, and then these are the outcomes or key results that we need to drive, right? Now, those results will have to be kind of uh, ideally should be broken out of this is what we want to do in a quarter one, this is what we want to do in quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, if not monthly. In some cases, we also do at a monthly level. This is what we'll do at month one, with month two, and so on and so forth, right? So, for instance, if it is about like improving the accuracy from 75 to 85% by month two or by quarter two, is it 80% or not? By quarter three, whether if it's 83% or not, by quarter four, whether if it is 85% or not, and so on and so forth, right? So that's something happens, and then once that there is a huge work that needs to happen from a that planning perspective to ensure that the rest of the monitoring becomes easier. To your point, right? How do we monitor it? So now come quarter one or come quarter two, if the some of those KRs are becoming starting to become yellow, wherein the targets have not been achieved, or the fact that we're lagging behind, that is where the dive deep happens, right? So a lot of the front loading happens on the planning stage to ensure that the right objectives the right initiatives are being driven, the right KRs are being defined. Once that is done, it's more about the tracking part of it. If the goals are green, all good, right? No worries, everything is going fine, no support needed. The moment it start to become a yellow, right? It is when, okay, what support do you need? Is it can this goal? What is the chances of this goal to becoming from a yellow to a red, right? And going deeper into it, and so on and so forth. As long as you have the path to becoming green again, it is good. But if it is not, then start deep diving into it and start fixing it. But what we tell the teams is like, don't tell us come November or December that this is not going to happen, because you have to start telling it much sooner. The better you communicate, the better it is. If you need support, or if the goals were set in the wrong direct, too ambitious, that is fine as well, right? So, but just be transparent about it, right? That is fine if it was ambitious, but then it should not be surprises at the end of the year.
You are, I think, very transparent answer, Vishal. So, when you are dealing, so many complicated moving parts, right? You may need support from not only from your team, whether it's the top or even, your subordinates, but you also use ecosystem, right? So, do you use ecosystem? When I say ecosystem, whether it is a startup, right, or whether it is the service providers, right, at different, so how do you use the ecosystem, Vishal, from your experience?
No, we do. There is a heavy use of ecosystem in general, because I think that classic build versus buy discussion happens a lot. So I'll be transparent about it. If there are things in which there are certain projects where we feel that even to get those team get started and start delivering or do an investment of it will take a lot of time versus us kind of buying that solution. We'll say that, hey, let's go buy that solution. It also becomes like whether there is a strategic advantage that we have for it to kind of own it or not, right? So that sort of a thing, and under the classic case of like how much cost it is, how much, what is this time to market, whether if it is strategic or not, whether if it is something where we have the expertise or not, right? If we don't have the expertise, do we want to have that expertise in the long term or not, right? So all of those things that you want to evaluate, like the classic things, you do that, and then if we feel that okay, it's better to buy, we'll buy. But if it is better to build, we will build that. So yes, so that happens a lot.
Any examples? Again, you don't need to name for which company or which vendor you used, but any names where you say that, hey, we evaluated buy versus build, then we went for buy, right? Because of some reasons.
Yeah, yeah. There've been a few scenarios there've been a few scenarios where we have seen that some of the on the experimentation side, some of the model observability side, there are times when we felt that okay, these are the things which are best, which are more outsourced versus kind of having in-house. There'll always be in all of those kind of debates of whether we be having in-house or not. And there are times where we said that okay, hey, it makes sense for us to kind of do take those buy decisions and then kind of rather because those are not that strategic for us or the amount of investment that will require even for us to kind of get to a point which is usable would be a lot. So yeah, so there are solutions where those buy decisions have been taken.
Sure. Now, how do you engage with startup? Any success stories from usage of startups? Again, it's not restricted to the organization you worked currently in the past, but as a overall GCC, whatever you know, Vishal.
So yeah, so I think there have been times when there have been success stories. I think some of the success stories that I've seen in the past have also been on not just from an application standpoint. There are times when honestly it's also been with the FT engagements, right? So in my past also there have been times when we have said that okay, hey, by the way, for us to kind of hire these resources and get started and kind of start delivering will take us a lot of time. Can we have FT and engagements with companies and kind of say, can we have that substitution of our or augmentation of our headcount through that? So there are companies in my experiences in the industry where I've partnered with companies like EXL, Deloitte, Affine, EY, a lot of these companies where we've done that augmentation as well. There are times when we've had success stories, like I was telling you, even from a cloud perspective in the past where we felt that okay, companies like Google or AWS are better uh, in a better position to kind of use some of the off-the-shelf product versus we kind of building it in-house, right? So that is something that has we've seen success in that as well. Um, there have been times, even on the CX part of it as well, there are certain tech solutions where we've seen some of these companies are better equipped. They have much more knowledge and technical ability to kind of help us get to the ground hitting much sooner. So that is where also we've seen some success. So yes, there are a lot of successes that we've seen.
Sure, Vishal. Just a couple of more questions from the startup aspect, right? There are many
Yeah,
startups, since I've been in the ecosystem. There are many of them want to sell to the enterprises, but one of the reasons they're not able to penetrate into the enterprise, even though we have in the doorstep, like within the same cities,
yeah,
it's like uh, unavailability of access, right? And if, for example, someone wants to sell to Best Buy, GCC in India,
yeah,
how do they
yeah,
really go about it? Because Best Buy has only one handle, right? I think whether it's a LinkedIn.
yeah,
So the Best
yeah,
Buy GCC, it's not visible, right? Probably leaders
yeah.
like you, one or two people might come and talk.
Yeah,
So any suggestions, tips for people to how they can go again, not specific to one GCC, I'm
yeah,
saying in general,
yeah,
Vishal.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I can imagine Shankara where you're coming from. It would not be like an easy one. I think getting some sort of introductions obviously helps. To be honest, to kind of make sure that okay, if there is a need and there is an opportunity, so you know that okay, someone will kind of reach out. So that is something for sure. Uh, there are there is specific legal aspect or entity aspect because of which you'll not see some of the organizations and multiple forums versus or multiple communication ways. So that is what could be one of the reasons where startups like yours might get stuck. But once those legal aspects are kind of covered for those avenues will definitely open up. But yeah, I think thirdly, it is. A lot of, I think, show and tell can always happen in the sense that, okay, this is what the capabilities are, this is what our solutions are, and then if it clicks, then obviously that should also be okay. But yeah, I think there are ways in which it can happen. I feel there are times when some of these organizations are also participating in conferences where you have people, leaders kind of coming in over there. Those could also be some of the good opportunities to kind of showcase some of the work that companies like startups are doing. And they don't necessarily have to do it by having a booth, but even having like a presence over there and knowing that, okay, there are GCC leaders. I know there are conferences that happens which are very focused to GCC as well. I know a few of them coming in over the next few months. Presence in that and kind of making sure that even ability to kind of showcase some of that work could be one of the ways also, I feel.
Sure, sure. Specifically, whether Best Buy has any accelerator program in India for startups? Okay, no.
Not really, yeah. So yes, I think for in India, I think we are still very early stages. I think there are a lot more things that we have to do before we get into an accelerator program. But yes, I know companies like obviously like Amazon was doing it when I was there. So that was something that was a huge success, I know, but not Best Buy at least.
Sure, sure, sure. Last question from the startup side, right? One of the reasons, again, the startup sphere for the large companies is the huge procurement process, there are a lot of compliance process and things. So having a GCC in India, right? If I want to sell it to GCC in India, whether still the procurement will happen at a global level, or is there any procurement happening at a India level also, Vishal?
Because of the global practices, a lot of it happens at a global level, to be honest, right? Especially for GCCs which are early in their maturity curve, right? So for them, a lot of definitely happens at a global level. But even the GCCs that I know, like the ones that I've worked in the past, like something like an Amex or Wells Fargo and all of those that I'm aware of, over there also, even if any kind of a procurement will happen, it still has to kind of conform to global practices and the fact that what those requirements would be. But to your point, the ones which are like at least early in their cycle, lot of that will still continue to be at a global level versus local.
Okay, okay, sure. As an MNC, you will follow the global practice, but at least you have India representation so that at least they will,
Oh,
otherwise,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
at the global level, it will get stuck in, 10,000, vendors, right? I think it will never get prioritized, right? At least, the India procurement team, they will follow the global practice, but at least they will be looking at Indian purchases, which is at least will be few
Yes,
hundreds, if not tens of thousands,
yes,
right? Okay, okay.
yes, yes, yes.
Sure, 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 Rashad. So, we are almost at the end of our time, but I have few more questions. Not sure how are you doing with time,
Sure,
Vishal?
sure. Let's wrap it up. Let me know what those questions, and I'm happy to help.
Okay, okay. Probably I will then continue with maximum three, four questions, right? So for you also, Vishal, you might be procuring various tools, right? I think for you to execute your job. So whether that is again centrally being procured, or is it for certain work, right? I think where you and your team is almost close to the problem, so you see that this solution might be far more relevant. So do we have say in buying that, Vishal?
Yeah. So, like I said, I think it is different solutions for different problems. So one is like there are problems which are we are trying to kind of manage at a global level. For those decisions, because whenever those decisions are taken by versus Bell, right? Especially they happen at whether they are able to kind of have a more global impact or whether they have global implications or not. So in those cases, yes, it happens more at a global level. But the problems which are very specific or being solved within the GCCs over here, then yes, that is where those are kind of being solved locally. But then there is obviously there are like leaderships. There will always be like CDOs or CTOs which will be kind of sitting in the headquarters. So you'll have to kind of make sure that there is some sort of a buy-in that's happening from there as well. So yeah, so I think it's a combination of that, depending upon the situation and the solution that we're kind of trying to buy.
Sure, sure, Vishal. We already touched about the how the AI is helping you on a certain aspect, but I'm saying as of overall, how your life 5 years before, right? I think you are being there in data for for more than a decade or so, right? And using generative AI, how the life has changed, right? I think could you give a narrative there?
No, I think we are seeing a lot of benefit, especially on the unstructured or the text data. So I remember a lot of the tagging, labeling, and all of that we used to do many, many years back. It used to be a huge problem. Cleaning of data used to be a huge problem. A lot of that, some of the text-related problems are getting solved much quicker. The time to kind of market is much quicker, right? To give you an example, some of the summarizations of reviews and all of that that you see right now in a lot of the retailers, including the Best Buy, has been able to kind of done through those generative AI solutions, which are much easier to use. A lot of the entity extraction work that used to take a lot of time, and the tuning of that used to take a lot of time earlier in the earlier days, becoming much, much quicker right now because of the generative AI applications and even using like off-the-shelf solutions. People don't have to kind of train their own data, go through that cycle. Let me collate the data, let me train the data, let me improve the data by feedback and so on and so forth. Now it is like, hey, by the way, I've got this data, I've got this model. These are the outcomes that I'm getting. Now, if the outcomes are not making sense, I'll kind of do that either through prompt engineering or, if need be, I'll start kind of doing a fine tuning of the data. But then uh, there's a lot of initial work that we used to have happen earlier has definitely been cut short, and the time to market has improved a lot. But having said that, yes, I don't think that we've capitalized all of that in its entirety. I think there's a lot more that can still be done. We are still figuring it out. There are certain operational things, like even uh, routing of data, even some of the chatbot stuff. I don't think that has been cracked to a very large extent. Some of this automated response and kind of 5-year solutions where you want to kind of, the goals is like how you can have lesser um, uh, time for the live agent because there's a cost to it, how you can kind of optimize that. I don't think that's been cracked to the full. It's been cracked partially, but we are still going through that journey to kind of make sure that that is getting better and better. Understanding the customer context, understanding what they need, and kind of providing the right solution in an automated way versus agents. So yeah, so there are certain opportunities that we still need to kind of tap into.
Okay. So with that background, right, if someone wants to enter into the data science today, right, what will you advise them, right? I think is it more the coding and those is important, or still the fundamental object handling? What will you suggest them? What do you want them to expect to learn so that they are fit for the new order?
So I think there are 2 to 3 things that I would kind of definitely recommend anyone who's coming in, right? So one is like they should definitely go back to the fundamentals. I think in my experience, that has always helped me, right? When I say fundamental, people should have fundamental understanding of how statistics work. People should have fundamental understanding of how models work, right? Whether if it is how the architectures are, if someone is talking about a classifier, if someone is talking about some sort of a model. At the end of the day, it's more like an optimization problem, or if someone is talking about from an architecture standpoint, transfer model, what those encoders or decoders mean, right? Rather than just jumping into the application part of it. So until and unless they understand, depending upon the fact that if they want to become like a scientist, right? If you want to become a AI engineer, then it is a very different problem. But if you want to become an AI scientist, some of those fundamentals are important. But at the same time, I think what is increasingly becoming important is like to have like an end-to-end view of it, right? Gone are the days where they're saying that okay, I will kind of start to create a model, and then someone else kind of takes make sure that it's getting deployed or getting optimized, right? Because of the amount of data that the most of these at least the new age solutions that we're working in, and the cost that comes into play, a lot of that responsibility is going back to the scientists and not just engineers as well, right? How that optimization of cost and development is happening and that level, and not just at the engineering level, right? So yeah, so I think and that is where that design mindset is super important. That if you're talking about it, like what is an end-to-end flow looking like, how you're getting the data, how you're kind of building the model, how you're kind of deploying the model, or how you're kind of instancing and all of that, right? So even if a person is not kind of not involved into end-to-end, but even if having like an end-to-end understanding is super important, right? Because until and unless they do that, it will be very difficult to be kind of successful, right? So yeah, so I think those would be a few things that I will say. So one is obviously going back to the basics, making sure that they understand that, and then two, having an end-to-end view, better design view as well, and then uh, obviously how to kind of make it more of a product and an application versus just like a use case solution.
I'm sure your input will be valuable for a lot of youngsters who are watching this video, Vishal. Maybe last two questions, right? So from the GCC perspective, right? Apart from the objectives, what you are handling, right? Whether the cost optimization or even in like for example, even the data, whether that is also part of your regular routine or the cost optimization other thing, unless it's specified at the objective, it really doesn't matter to you.
Oh, it does. It does. I think so. There are multiple ways in which teams like ours will be involved in a cost optimization perspective. The cost optimization could happen because of our either from our tech debt, or cost optimization could happen either from our tech solutions, it could happen from our cloud costs, or cost optimization could also happen from a non-technology perspective, which is a business perspective, like we've talked about in the past, like how do we kind of optimize it? But if your point was more from a technology standpoint, yes, that is something which is super important, and the teams have to kind of make sure that the technology overheads or tech debts are not going to a point where no one is kind of looking at it. So the leaders have to kind of optimize for that for sure.
Sure, sure, sure. So probably the kind of last question is like, you are handling so many different tasks and so on. So how do your typical day looks like? And what are your challenges in accomplishing your task as a leader?
So yeah, so I think a typical day would look obviously with a lot of meetings. I would say with that goes without saying, but at the same time, I think a lot of context switching as well. I think in one of the discussions could be about a data, another discussion could be about a model, another discussion could be about a platform, and then so on and so forth, right? So how that context switching has happened is super important. I think I'll not say that the ways in which either I'm struggling or someone at my level might be struggling, but one of the things that um, I try to do is kind of enable the teams and do a lot of making sure that the objectives and the planning is done in the right way, right? If that is done in the right way, then I think the later on it becomes more about the tracking and ensuring that where you want to kind of dive deep or not. So you'll have to kind of enable your teams. You'll have to kind of make sure that those are able to kind of make those decisions to kind of reach those initiatives or reach those objectives. But then ensuring that at least at the planning stage, how we can kind of ensure that why is this important? Is this the most important thing that should be solved? If it is not, then what else could teams be solving? Is this the best use of the time? Or in Amazon, we used to have like one of the things like whether it's a one-way door decision or a two-way door decision, right? If it is a one-way door decision, then yes, a lot of planning and ensuring that uh, we are not making mistakes. But if it's a two-door decision, then it's okay. Like quickly iterate. If you're failing, just shut it down and shut it down quickly, right? I think those kind of things. So yeah, so I think that is something. All of these things become important to kind of become important to kind of make sure that we are able to kind of function in a more productive and an optimized way.
Great, Vishal. As a leader, how do you equip yourself? What are the things you learn, Vishal?
So I do listen to podcasts. I think some of the things that I try to keep myself abreast is like what are the updates that are happening around the world. I try to kind of subscribe to newsletters to kind of understand some of the updates because podcasts are also pretty intensive. They can take a lot of time. So how you can kind of subscribe to the right newsletters to kind of make sure that okay, which are the ones you can quickly skim through, and if you have to double click, you can always double click on the ones. The other ways is speaking to people like you and others to say, hey, what kind of work they are doing, other leaders are doing, how are they kind of leveraging data and AI in their organization, in their setups, what success they've made, what are they've been learning. So I do have some of the network that I do tap into at time to time to kind of understand that. But yeah, having said that, it's not perfect. Sometimes you're able to do one versus the other more, and maybe not able to do all of them at once as well, right? Depending upon the schedules and all. But that's the hope. But the challenge is things are changing so fast and so fast. I think having the focuses is also important. It's not just important to be updated about each and every aspect or each and every update, but the important is like what is the implication that is having and which are the ones which are more important versus not that important, right? So I think that is the key, I feel.
Yeah, fantastic, Vishal. Genuinely, I'm telling proud. I would say that I got better, having conversation with you in a yeah, hour and a half back to now, right? And if the time is there with you, I would even have conversation for 1 more hour. But I'm cognizant of your valuable time, right? So and thanks a lot and kudos for the great work you're doing and bringing more jobs, right? And also adding a lot of value to the youngsters. So thanks a million for your time, Vishal, for spending time with me.
Thanks a lot, Shangara. It was my pleasure having here. I think great set of questions. I hope you and the broader audiences find it useful. Looking forward to kind of connecting with you again for sure.
Thanks a million, Vishal.